So, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And well, let me thank you as well to the TMA for the very kind invitation to your beautiful country. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here and to speak about well, how the Swiss government tackles the challenges of the digital transformation, and of course how we see, well, the new technologies could contribute to improving the competitiveness of the Swiss economy. Well, let me show the agenda of my presentation today. Well, in the background here you see three very famous mountains from Switzerland. Well, you see the Eiger, the Mank, and the Jungfrau here, and well, you know, standing in a row, they form a very consistent picture. I will try to provide that as well with my presentation. Therefore, I will speak to 3 points. First, I will start to provide you with some, well, facts and figures about Switzerland, because I think it's very important to know something about the country which is affected. It helps to better understand why a government does something or does something not. Then, secondly, I know you have already learned a lot about the digital transformation, but, well, maybe I will speak a little bit how the Swiss government sees the main challenges we are facing regarding the digital transformation. And then, well, third, I will provide you with some information about the Swiss digital strategy, how the government deals with this kind of challenges. Well, let's begin with some key facts about Switzerland. Well, you maybe know Switzerland is a very small country. Well, and this is very relevant for our self-perception. You know, regarding the size, Switzerland is only number 133 in the world. With a population of 8.5 million, well, Switzerland is even smaller than the whole Bangkok metropolitan region. So, regarding the population, we are only number 98 in the world. Well, when it comes to our political system, I know every country would claim that, but I will claim it anyway. Regarding our political system, I think it's fair to say it's very complicated. You know, Switzerland is a federal state. This means that subordinated state levels have really significant decision-shaping powers, especially when it comes to the field of taxation or, well, education. And this will be very, very important regarding the challenges of the digital transformation. Well, you know, Switzerland is a direct democracy. This means that decision-shaping procedures are usually, well, very complicated. Well, this is mainly due to a tradition. Historically, we have no significant opposition party. All big parties from the left to the right are, well, included in the government. It's kind of a consensual government. Well, this comes along with public votations. You know, Swiss people can vote on, well, almost anything. Every 3 months we have, well, a public vote. And, well, it's not a joke. In autumn, we will vote, for example, whether it should be possible to cut the horns of the cows or not. This is really no joke. We will vote on that. So, as a result, when new projects will pass, they are usually very broadly supported by the population. Well, on the other hand, to pass a new idea, well, the population has to be convinced of this idea. Well, and at least my evidence is that this can be really, really hard to convince really the population. Now let's come to the Swiss economy. Well, I think besides the political circumstances, Switzerland has a very strong economy. Due to the IMF, Switzerland is the 20th biggest economy in the world. Regarding the GDP per capita, Switzerland is even under the top 10 performer in the world. Well, you may think Switzerland is only banks and watch industry, but this is not true. The biggest industry in Switzerland is the pharmaceutical sector. Well, and as you can see on the chart, well, Switzerland was also hit very hard by the financial crisis. However, the economy recovered very quickly, and at least compared to other countries like the Eurozone or the UK. Well, you know, Switzerland has no kind of natural resources like gas or oil or even raw materials. Well, we can only provide a beautiful country as Thailand, of course, and, well, strong innovation activity. In our view, innovation is maybe the most important building block for the Swiss economy. As you can see on the chart, well, private companies as well as the government are spending more than 3.3% of the whole GDP for research and development. This is a huge amount. Well, you may see that the money is spent in a very effective manner because the high number of patent application per inhabitant, you see it on the chart as well, it's 884 per million inhabitant, that's number one in the world. That shows that the money is spent, well, pretty effective for research and development. Well, these investments are as well reflected in different competitiveness indicators, as you can see on the chart. Well, I think it's fair to say that Switzerland is on almost every competitive indicator on top or in the top 5. Indeed, we lost some places in the IMD ranking last year, but you see in other rankings we are still number 1. Well, I think beside innovation, there are some reasons for the very good ranking. Well, I think the reasons are mainly the framework conditions, which are pretty good in Switzerland. Just to name some of them, well, it's the flexible labor market, it's the very high-skilled labor force, we have a low tax environment, well, a sustainable government budget, high quality of public infrastructure, a dense network of free trade agreements. We have a very important bilateral agreement with the European Union. And, well, finally, we have kind of a sound macroeconomic environment. Well, unfortunately, we're not top in every field, especially when it comes to, well, e-government. Well, at least there we see some room for improvement. You see the top rankings, when you take a look at the top rankings, you see the Nordics like Denmark or Norway. Well, they are doing really well in this regard. I mentioned earlier our federalist structure. I think this is maybe the main reason for our, well, difficulties regarding e-government, because a lot of the competences lies in the hand of the cantons. Well, and you can imagine it's very complicated to coordinate 26 different e-government systems between the cantons. Well, unfortunately, there are only bumpy roads to success for Switzerland. However, the central government is trying very hard to achieve some first improvements in this regard, but I will come back later on this. So, an interesting slide, at least when I saw the figures the first time, regarding payment with smartphones, we are literally nowhere. When you compare it, for example, with Thailand, India, or China. Well, in Switzerland these days, only about 17% of all consumers are using payment by smartphone. Well, and to be honest, the reason for that is not really clear to me. Well, I can assume that, well, Swiss people maybe have a clear preference for more privacy, and they maybe do not trust in the providers of online payment. But, well, I couldn't prove this hypothesis. Well, anyway, I'm pretty sure that it will be only a matter of time until the Swiss people will use payment by mobile phone more often. Well, at least we can say it's not due to the, well, ICT broadband infrastructure. You can see on this slide that, well, the supply of broadband internet in Switzerland is very good. I think this is mainly due to a liberal and innovation-friendly telecom regulation. You know, Swiss companies, government-owned as well as private companies, they invested intensively in high-speed internet infrastructure. And, well, we assume they will do the same regarding new technologies like the G5 standard. Well, I think, therefore, it's fair to say the provision of ICT infrastructure is one of the best in the world at the moment in Switzerland. So, let me come now to the challenges of the digital disruption, or at least where we can see the main challenges. So in the last year, we saw some really fundamental innovations we heard about in the previous presentation. Maybe I will only shortly repeat our view on that. Well, the availability of mobile internet allowed really a lot of improvements. Just imagine what you can do with your cell phone, with your mobile phone today. Well, not only texting, I mean, you can pay your stuff, maybe not in Switzerland, but you have health application and so on. So there is, well, almost an infinite amount of things you can do with your devices. Well, and due to mobile data, it has been possible as well to connect all devices together, the so-called Internet of Things. Well, furthermore, thanks to the interconnectedness, it is possible to generate and use really huge amount of data to develop even more business models. Well, from an economic point of view, these innovations have some consequences for the way the economy works. We see an emergence of new platforms, the so-called two-sided markets, which are able to reduce transaction costs significantly. Usually, platforms benefit from network effects. The more suppliers a platform has, the more attractive it becomes for customers and vice versa. Well, you all know the examples like Facebook, Booking, or TripAdvisors, and other. Well, but there are innovations as well, like 3D printing, artificial intelligence, blockchain, you name it. And a lot of these technologies will maybe able to break up existing global value chains. And this will have an impact for economic policies. Well, at the end of the day, for economic policy, the big question is whether these innovations really lead to productivity gain and to more prosperity or not. At least the Swiss government thinks this will be the case when we deal properly with the challenges of the digital transformation. Well, looking back, some recent studies by the OECD show that, well, ICT was estimated to contribute about 1/3 to economic growth in the last 20 years. So what does this mean for policymakers and for the government? Well, first, we think an increasing amount of existing and successful business models are coming under pressure. For example, the travel agencies, music video stores, taxi drivers, but also banks and insurance companies facing competition now from new and maybe more efficient business models. Of course, the incumbents can strike back, as we learned in the presentation before. But, well, on the other hand, this is a chance as well for small country when they are open, well, they can maybe better integrate in global value chains. However, this will make it even more challenging to regulate these kind of industries, especially independently from other countries. Thus, I think it's fair to say more international collaboration and coordination is needed in this regard. Well, second, there is one big question: do we see the end of work? Are we all being replaced by artificial intelligence, by robots? Well, I will get back on this later. Well, third, the big question is, well, the new technologies, are they resilient enough? Are they safe enough? I'm thinking of all the new, cybercrime risk. We think this will be one of the key issues when it comes to trust in digital technologies. Fourth, it's maybe a question of competition policy. The question whether we have a problem with increasing market power and, well, therefore a lack of competition. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a proper answer to all these questions, but let me show in detail how, well, Swiss policy deals with these challenges. Well, already in 2012, the Swiss government, well, decided on a comprehensive digital strategy. Well, what you see here on the chart is already the third draft, which was decided on last year. An update is currently planned for late 2018. Well, as you can see, the strategy has four main objectives. The first is to fostering innovation and economic growth. Secondly, the government wants to strive for equal opportunities. Third, more transparency and security. And fourth, the sustainable development. Well, to meet these goals, the Swiss government defined 8 field of actions. First, well, of course, maybe the most important, the framework conditions of the digital economy. Second, well, the provision of development of fast and accessible ICT infrastructure, then the handling of data and digital content, proper e-government services, to facilitate the political participation. I told at the beginning, Switzerland is a direct democracy. We will vote every 3 months on any issue. Therefore, it will be, very important to provide a safe and secure e-voting system to the population. Then we have the so-called knowledge-based society. I will come back on that. And, of course, security and trust. And finally, we think international coordination, more international coordination is needed. Therefore, it is an explicit field of action for the Swiss government. Let me now go deeper into the aspects of the digital economy. First of all, let me quickly explain, the Swiss economic policy approach, because it's different to the approach from other countries. And I think it's very useful to, for a complete understanding of our policies. Generally, Swiss economic policy has 2 goals. First is to improve, the growth of labor productivity. And the second goal is, we want everybody to work in Switzerland. Therefore, we want to keep a very high labor supply in Switzerland. To achieve these 2 objectives, we refrain from any kind of industrial policy. We think that the Swiss government is not the right institution to identify future or the chances of future technologies. So we don't do that. We think, this should be done by free markets. In our view, the government should rather provide excellent framework conditions for the private economy. Well, just to name some of them, we think the government should provide a high-class infrastructure, high-skilled labor force, well, flexible labor market, and of course, the market should face competition, heavy competition, and of course, it's useful to have an efficient government. Let me show how we do that in the context of the digitalization. An official starting point was a very comprehensive analysis of the economic challenges and the existing legal framework when it comes to the digital economy. I will just provide you with some maybe the key findings of the comprehensive analysis. The first finding was, in general, that the existing legal framework in Switzerland is very flexible and is able to adapt to new business model, especially when it comes to the sharing economy. So, therefore, on a first view, we didn't saw a lot of existing regulations which are really hampering, the economic growth or prosperity or innovation. So, however, to be really sure on that, we launched something we called digital test. Well, this is basically a survey. We asked companies, business associations, trade unions, and consumer associations as well, whether they could name existing impediments to the digitalization. Well, so far we got some feedback, and we are currently evaluating all the answers. I think so far it appears that there are not really big problems in this regard in Switzerland. Well, second finding was in regard to the crowding out of low-skilled employees. There were some kind of anxieties in Switzerland that low-skilled people were replaced by robots or artificial intelligence, but we found that we do not see really a crowding out at the moment. So, however, a key question regarding platform, the so-called platform workers, for example, a Uber driver, remained. It's not really clear whether we should treat them as self-employed or employed by the company. So, therefore, we expect the court to decide on that shortly. Well, the next finding is in regard to high-class education. There we saw a gap in IT professorships in Switzerland. So as a first reaction, new research priorities have been set by the government. Currently, the government is discussing whether the budget of the federal universities should be increased or not, even to better meet the needs created by the digitalization. Furthermore, more emphasis is set on the promotion of the so-called STEM industries. This is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Then we've seen that banking regulation is an issue for new fintech companies in Switzerland, especially because the tough capital requirements also apply to fintech companies in Switzerland. And you maybe know the banking regulation is very strict in Switzerland. Well, therefore, the government decided to design a completely new innovation license and a sandbox as well, with less strict rules, especially for fintech companies. Aim of the new law is to reduce the market entry barriers for fintech, for example, in the field of crowdfunding or crypto assets. Well, and we think new business models should be developed in this field and thus, increase competition with incumbents. A finding regarding competition policy was that the notification threshold for mergers which is linked to turnovers in Switzerland, may not be appropriate for all kind of mergers. This goes back to the Facebook-WhatsApp merger in 2014. The merger, you maybe know that, was not subject to the notification obligation because, turnover of WhatsApp was too low. So therefore, we will think about adjusting the threshold in Switzerland like in other countries, for example, in Germany. Well, another issue was data. Well, the first main finding was that, the Data Protection Act is needed to be modernized. You maybe know that the European Union revised their Data Protection Act as well, and it works like extraterritorial for Swiss companies as well. And therefore, between, for example, when you have global operating Swiss companies, they have maybe subsidiaries in Germany, and they are transferring a lot of data every day. I learned that there is, more than some billions of personal data which is being transferred between Switzerland and the European Union. Well, and the European Union came back to us and told us, if you couldn't provide an equivalent legal framework, you will have problems with the transfer of this kind of data. So therefore, we had to adjust our Data Protection Act. Well, furthermore, the government thinks that the government treatment of its own data should be a role model. Therefore, we decided to develop an official data policy, which describes best practice for the handling of data, including the publication of as many government data as possible. This project is called OGD, that stands for Open Government Data. Well, finally, the last finding I would like to mention is in regard to e-government services. You've already seen that in Switzerland there are still a lot of government services which are not provided digitally. Well, this is mainly due to the federalist structure, which makes coordination complicated. Well, however, I think it's fair to say that some really sizable projects have already started in the last year. The first one is the complete redesign of all custom procedures. Well, the aim of the project is that in future you should do your exports and imports completely digitally. Every procedure could be made online. Well, secondly, currently we do not have an electronic identity in Switzerland. So therefore, the Parliament is currently working on a new legal base providing an electronic identity. Well, and finally, maybe more a vision than a down-to-earth project is the so-called one-stop shop. Well, aim of the project is that you have only one single platform here for the communication between the companies and the government and all levels of government. So last year we started with the version 1.0, including some first features, but you can imagine in Switzerland with the federalist structure it's complicated. However, it's planned to increase the services steadily. So a second field I would like to mention is the so-called knowledge-based society. On the one hand, we think it's of greatest importance that the skills of the population can match with the requirements of the market. Well, on the other hand, a strong innovation, and thus competitiveness is really based on research and innovation. Let me show our view on these two challenges. Well, maybe one of the most challenging parts of the digital transformation is the labor market. We currently observe that a growing number of professional activities is being replaced by technological developments, for example, in the field of logistics, manufacturing, but as well in the service sector. Well, and it's clear this creates anxieties in the population. Well, to illustrate that, I can provide you with a recent front page of the biggest German magazine. Well, the headline here is in German, but it says, can read it, "You're fired." So you can see a robot is, picking up a white-collar worker, and, it suggests that, white-collar workers are being replaced by artificial intelligence. And, some voices are even claiming that we see now the beginning of the end of work. Well, at least this is not the view of the Swiss government. We think the opposite is true. We think that the digital transformation will create many jobs and professional activities we cannot even think about. Well, the challenge will be much more to find adequate and targeted ways of education and training. Well, and looking back, these kind of anxieties were always there. For example, the same magazine in 1978 with the, kind of a similar headline, and even in 1964, similar headline. Well, however, at the end of the day, I think it's fair to say that technological progress in most countries has always had a positive effect on employment and prosperity. Well, challenges experienced in the labor market have always been successfully overcome. Well, in this regard, we think Switzerland is very well prepared. Especially the flexible labor market is a great asset that must be maintained. Labor market regulation in Switzerland is based on what we call the flexicurity approach. It comes from flexibility and security. Well, on the one hand, this approach contains a really moderate level of protection against dismissal, and reintegration in the labor market is supported by the regional job placement agencies operating a proactive labor market policy. This is the flexibility approach. In return, involuntary breaks between jobs are relatively well covered by the compensation for the loss of income by the unemployment insurance. This is the security aspect. In other words, flexibility and social protection are not mutually exclusive. In the contrary, they may complement each other in Switzerland. Well, the fact that employees have so far been able to adapt so well to the changed requirements is also attributable to the education system. Especially the dual-track vocational education has proved to be very effective in adapting to new technologies. Apprentices in Switzerland are working 3 to 4 days in the week in the company, and they go to school for 1 or 2 days. So, and the content of the training is mainly defined by the companies themselves or by the business association. So, it's ensured that the education is very close to the needs of the market. Well, regarding research, we are very happy and proud, of course, to have 2 world-class universities in Switzerland, the EPF in Lausanne and the ETH in Zurich belong to the world-leading places for research in technology, engineering, and ICT. Well, to strengthen their position even more, the Swiss government decided to define 5 research priorities for the next couple of years. First, we have the data analytics, then we have innovation, which is based on big data, we have artificial intelligence, robotics, and the Internet of Things. Well, before I finish my presentation, I would like to highlight, well, some current projects going on in Switzerland. Well, first, after isolated cyber attacks on Swiss companies, the awareness regarding security aspects raised sharply. So therefore, the government decided to create a completely new cyber risk center. Second, the government aims to work on the proper regulation for artificial intelligence. A special focus is currently set on the drones, on the flying drones. Then we aim, well, to develop a completely new strategy for smart cities and smart villages as well. Fourth, there is a project going on which aims to bundle the ticket reservation system of all means of transport. Well, in the future it should be possible that you can book only with one app a single trip from your home to any place, including planes, trains, taxis, buses, ships, whatever you can imagine. Then, well, currently the crypto assets are booming, not only in Switzerland, but I mean they raise some important questions at the moment, especially when it comes to the risk of money laundering and investor protection. So therefore, the Swiss government implemented a working group which is thinking about, well, whether the existing legal framework in Switzerland is still adequate or not. So finally, in Switzerland there are still a couple of legal provisions which require the written form. For example, when you would like to apply for a consumer credit, you have still to sign the contract by hand, handwritten signature. So the government is, well, at least expected to discuss this issue, especially the abolition of these requirements in late August this year. So I would like to conclude with some, let's say, key takeaways from my presentation to, well, summarize the Swiss approach, how we tackle the digitalization. I think it's fair to say that the government has a quite active role in, well, in the further development of the framework conditions for the economy, namely maintaining the flexible labor market, well, to improve the education system, of course, well, to tackle the issue of cybercrime, of course, and, well, it will follow closely all the developments regarding digitalization. Then, on the other hand, the Swiss government is very cautious regarding the regulation of new technologies. It's more a restrained role. We don't want to regulate too quickly, too hasty. So, furthermore, it's important to our government that we do not follow an industrial policy. So, we think it's too complex for the Swiss government. It should be done by free markets. All right, I will leave it like that. Thank you very much for your attention.